For a second lesson, words from the letter to the Hebrews, the 11th chapter. These, one and all, are remembered for their faith, yet they did not enter fully upon the promised inheritance, because with us in mind, God had a better plan, that only in company with us should they reach their perfection. And what of us? With all these witnesses to faith around us, like a great crowd, we must throw off every encumbrance and run with patience the race for which we are entered, our eyes fixed on Jesus, on whom faith depends from start to finish. I'm sure we've all come aware of how central memory is for us as human beings, especially as the years erode the capacity a tad. Almost every move we make, everything we do requires memory, from driving a car to using the computer to calling a friend to reading a book. I was going to include watching television, but it occurred to me that one can probably do that without much memory at all. And I think that may say something about its intellectual status. Laboratory chimpanzees, I am told, love to watch television. Charles Krauthammer, the columnist, writes, "The ultimate instrument for forgetting is television. It is inherent in the medium. The flickering image is impossible to retain. Who remembers the once ubiquitous Mike Douglas or Frank Reynolds? Pastlessness is inherent in video, with its fast cuts and dissolving shots, with its moving tape, forever recording a vanishing now. For television, every day is today, or this morning, or tonight. Television is a rolling present relieved only by commercial breaks." He goes on, "If the Ten Commandments were given today, they would be flashed on the great Diamond Vision screen at Yankee Stadium, and by sunup, not a soul would remember them." Come to think of it, not very many people remember them anyway. But we can't act sensibly without memory. We can't relate without memory. We can't even think without memory, and yet we have not the foggiest idea of how it works. It remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries confronting science. Does the brain, as some argue, actually store every single experience of our life? It is possible. There's no shortage of storage capacity. Richard Thompson, professor of psychobiology at the University of California, points out that the brain has over 50 billion nerve cells, and therefore more synaptic connections than the total number of particles in the universe. How they count, I have no idea, but he's a scientist and should know. But how does it work? We have no idea. We sure know when it doesn't. I like the story of the young man who woke up one morning after a rather long, late evening with his girlfriend, and he felt a certain panic, and he rushed to the telephone and called her up and said, "Pardon me, Ruth, but I really can't remember. Did I or did I not propose to you last night?" To which she replied, "George, I'm so glad you called. I was certain I said no to someone last night, but I forget who it was." But beyond these mundane problems, there are ways in which good memories and the effort to remember are essential and central to all that we are as human beings. Closely associated with faith and life, let me lift up a few briefly and suggest how we ought to keep them alive. Memory tells us how we got here this morning. Both Old and New Testament lift up the names of those whose faith and courage, labor and sacrifice made possible our story and in this day. Abraham and Moses, Sarah and Rahab, Gideon and Samson, Peter and Paul, and Mary. And we can add our own third testament, can we not? Testament to Augustine and Luther and Columbus and Washington, and the millions of unnamed who've given their lives in sacrifice that we might be here this morning, sitting comfortably and free, enjoying future. Lincoln and Wilson, teacher Alice and Father Bruce, and boyhood friend Ted, and college roommate Roger, and Ed Bottom, and Taylor Drake, and Bill Brubaker, whom we remember in gratitude this week. Fill in your own names. It all adds up to our story and whom we owe for the fact that we sit here this morning. Memory tells us where we've come from and who we've come from and what we owe. If we remember, if we look carefully, we recognize it was not an accident and we didn't do it on our own. There was strength and help that came when needed through others, so many others, and also from beyond. Fred Buechner sums it up so beautifully. So much has happened to us over the years, so much has happened within us and through us. We have to take time to remember what we can about it and what we dare. We have survived, you and I. Maybe that's at the heart of our remembering. After 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, or 80, we've made it to this year, this very day. We needn't have made it. There were times we never thought we would and nearly didn't. There were times we almost hoped we wouldn't. We're ready to give the whole thing up. Each must speak for himself, for herself. But I can say for myself that I've seen sorrow and pain enough to turn the heart to stone. Who hasn't? Many times I've chosen the wrong road or the right road for the wrong reason. Many times I've loved the people I love too much for either their good or mine, or others I might have loved I've missed. To remember my life is to remember countless times when I might have given up, gone under, when humanly speaking I might have gotten lost beyond the power of anybody to find me. But I didn't. I have not given up. And each of you, with all the memories you have and the tales that you could tell, you also have not given up. You also are survivors, are here. And what does that tell us, our surviving? It tells us that weak though we are, a strength beyond our own strength has pulled us through at least this far. Foolish as we are, a wisdom beyond our wisdom has flickered up just often enough to light the path forward. Faint of heart as we are, a love beyond our power to live has kept our hearts alive. So it is possible to find peace, the peace that comes from looking back and remembering that though most of the time we failed to see it, we were never really alone. Remembering we know where we come from and from whom, and remembering we do know that we are not alone. Ever stop and think that when you remember someone, you make them present to you again in a very real sense. Picked up Russell Baker's memoir, The Good Times, the other day. He begins it, "My mother, now dead to this world, is still roaming free in my mind, wakes me up some mornings before daybreak. If there's one thing I can't stand, Russell, it's a quitter." I remember my father, and at times he is as present to me as when he was alive in the flesh, and I can still hear his voice. "Gil, you've got to learn how to work hard." "I'm trying, Dad." The old Episcopal Book of Common Prayer reminds us that we are surrounded by the communion of saints. Saints meaning all of us, by the way. Indeed, in the course of life, one encounters a number of people, many in the most humble circumstances, whose impact on us is so intense that they, to coin a phrase, stay with us. They remain a living presence long after they die physically. And in some cases, it's hard to say whether the memory is less powerful than the man. And what philosophically is the difference between those physically alive but sort of sleepwalking through their days and those physically dead but alive in our memory? After evoking the memory of the past heroes of faith, the writer of the Hebrews goes on to say with great certainty, "Seeing we are surrounded by so great a cloud," I prefer crowd, "of witnesses," as if to say they are not only our past, they're very, very present to us. They look down on us and they cheer us on like a stadium of rooters at Greek games, friends who finished their race and who cheer us on. Are we so certain they do not? Jesus, the night before he left us, gave us bread and wine and said, "Do this remembering me." But you know that word remembering in the English doesn't quite cut it. In the Greek, it really means to take something past and make it really present again. Jesus assures us that he is with us always, but it is only in remembering, in his recalling, in thinking of him that his presence becomes real once more. Remembering is our part in making his Spirit powerful and present in our lives now. Bruce Sylvester writes, when school starts again, I think of a gray granite set of buildings, part of a cluster of institutions that anchored my neighborhood as a boy, each of which was only minutes from my home. Each was a stopping point on my little weekly circuit: school, church, the school store, home, always home. The years in which I progressed from learning the ABCs to reading Newsweek were spent largely in those gray granite buildings. They are full of associations with experiences that decades later are still yielding up their meaning to me. So when school starts again, I go back there in my mind. I go not for nostalgia, I go back again to try and penetrate more deeply into that which memory and maturity now open up. I go for the truth that was missed while the events were happening. That's the gift of memory. Charlie Cook was one of the people I remember. It was the beginning of my senior year in high school. I'd spent much of the summer in New York City getting a head start on some college courses, and I'd given my friend Charlie my phone number, and he promised he would visit. And I looked forward to seeing Charlie and sharing with him a bit of my summer in the Big Apple. He never came. When I got back to school, I looked for my friend in the place where he was boss, over the hot grill in the kitchen where he was master of the pancakes and scrambled eggs. Charlie was the head cook. And every night before dinner, I went to see him to talk about my day, because he always seemed interested in whatever I had to say, even if he had to keep cooking and wiping the sweat from his brow. I hadn't heard from my friend all summer, and that was a disappointment, but it didn't matter as much as beginning once again the conversations that had helped keep my spirits up during my school years. I went to the kitchen, but he wasn't there. Then I saw the dean of the school, and he came over to me. He knew that Charlie had become someone very special in my life, and he said, "Bruce, I have some bad news. Charlie died a few weeks ago. When we were going through his things, we found a phone number. It was yours. I think he was planning to see you." But I learned something from Charlie, something that has stayed with me longer than many of the lessons I learned in school. I learned that memory is a wonderful gift. It can give back to me the essence of what another person has been for me and what I've learned from him or her. So Charlie is still mashing potatoes and listening to me. And remembering him encourages me to try to listen to others even when I am busy. It gives life back to mere living. And not even death can take that gift away once it is really shared. So memory tells us where we've come from, who brought us to this day, and memory makes them alive again and real to us even now. Indeed, as they are. And memory of them, I think, can open up hope and future. Very interesting. The writer speaks of all these heroes of our past, not as if they were past, but as if they'd gone on ahead and now wait for us. God had a better plan, he says, that they should achieve their final goal only when we catch up with them. And his race pictures Jesus as out there ahead of us at the finish line, waiting with a laurel wreath of victory, waiting to give it to each one of us. You know, we must be careful how we picture those that we lose, lest we do more than grieve, lest we fall into habits of despair. They are not behind us in the past, says this old faith. They are in front of us, ahead of us, waiting for us, cheering us on. In the words of the poet, I cannot think of them as dead who walk with me no more. Along the path of life I tread, they have but gone before. A couple of examples of people who've learned to think of their loved ones in this way. There's William Sloane Coffin, who lost his son in a tragic accident, his son Alexander. In his eulogy, Bill Coffin quoted Hemingway first, "The world breaks everyone, and then some become strong at the broken places." Then he went on to say, my own broken heart is mending, and I've relearned one lesson. Love not only begets love, it begets strength. My own consolation lies in knowing that it was not the will of God that Alex die, that when the waves closed over the sinking car, God's heart was the first of our hearts to break. And finally, I know that when Alex beat me to the grave, the finish line was not Boston Harbor in the middle of the night. If a lamp went out, it was because for him the dawn had come. So I shall see consolation in that love which never dies, and I shall find peace in the dazzling grace that always is to come. So you see, this day of memory and faith reminds us above all that those we remember, the heroes of our faith, the loved ones of our own hearts, are not lost in some distant past, but alive in a great future, awaiting all of us, even though it is limited to our view now. And again, when Howard Thurman, great writer and dean of Boston University, died, a friend said of him in eulogy, when Howard passed away in 1981, we were saddened but not desperate. We understood more fully than ever the meaning of the words of the poet who said, those who are dead are never gone. They are there in the thickening shadow of tomorrow. He lives in the thousands of lives. He affected in the water that runs, in the opening doors. Never gone, deep river moving on. We are deeply aware of his continuing presence and his opening of the way ahead. Howard has a way of leading people home. Something like Jesus, who at that last meal with his friends said, do this, remembering me, and I am with you always. I go to prepare a place for you. I go ahead. So have they all. Let's remember that on this day.